Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and thank you for stopping by. My home thoughts turn to this image that I saw on Time magazine. A paper heart is viewed on top of a melting mound of snow as temperatures in New York City reach into the mid-40s, revealing trash that's been buried for weeks. That was on February the 20th, 2014 in New York City. And then I like this tweet from the real Banksy. What a wonderful thought it is that some of the best days of our lives have not happened yet. I've just finished another Don DeLillo book called White Noise, where he says the world is full of abandoned meanings. In the commonplace, I find unexpected themes and intensities. And finally, my brother lives in Chicago, and I love this photograph. A woman and the Chicago skyline are reflected in the snow-covered, curved surface of the Cloud Gate sculpture. Political reflections start with a tweet from Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi of him laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier on Iraqi Armed Forces Day yesterday. According to Reuters, North Korea is currently running its 6,000-member workforce for cyber warfare and performing cyber attacks for physical and psychological paralysis inside South Korea, such as causing troubles for military operations and national infrastructures, the South Korean Defense Ministry said. I wrote a piece in November 2010 when I wrote of a far away in distant lands lies the Hermit Kingdom. This land is ruled by the House of Kim, and its capital is Pyongyang. The first and eternal president was Kim Il-sung, and his successor Kim Jong-il, whose designated successor and now president is Kim Jong-un. They've all had tiny little hands, like the elves and the shoemaker, which is a story I used to like reading to Hannah. I'll put up a photograph of Pyongyang. According to France 24, 100 days in power for Afghan president, but no government yet. Very old pics tweeted President Dwight Eisenhower driving through Kabul, Afghanistan in an open-top limo in 1959. And this took me back to Adam Curtis's small snippet, which I played, and it's on Rich Wrap-Ups as well, under the headline Oh Dearism and Non-Linear War. And in this, he's talking about a fellow called Vladislav Surkov, a ceaseless shape-shifting that is unstoppable because it is indefinable. It is exactly what Surkov is alleged to have done in the Ukraine this year. In typical fashion, as the war began, Surkov published a short story about something he called non-linear war. A war where you never know what the enemy are really up to or even who they are. The underlying aim, Surkov says, is not to win the war, but to use the conflict to create a constant state of destabilized perception in order to manage and control. And when I saw this small snippet, I then went and looked up Vladislav Surkov, and there was an interesting piece I came across in The Atlantic, the hidden author of Putinism, how Vladislav Surkov invented the new Russia. My portfolio at the Kremlin and in government has included ideology, media, political parties, religion, modernization, innovation, foreign relations. And here he pauses and smiles, modern art. In the 21st century, the techniques of the political technologists have become centralized and systematized, coordinated out of the office of the presidential administration, where Surkov would sit behind a desk with phones bearing the names of all the independent party leaders, calling and directing them at any moment, day or night. The brilliance of this new type of authoritarianism is that instead of simply oppressing opposition, as has been the case with 20th century strains, It climbs inside all ideologies and movements, exploiting and rendering them absurd. One moment, Surkov would fund civic forums and human rights NGOs. The next, he would quietly support nationalist movements that accuse the NGOs of being tools of the West. With a flourish, he sponsored lavish arts festivals for the most provocative modern artists in Moscow, then supported orthodox fundamentalists dressed all in black and carrying crosses, who in turn attacked the modern art exhibitions. The Kremlin's idea is to own all forms of political discourse, to not let any independent movements develop outside of its walls. It was the first non-linear war at Surkov. In the primitive wars of the 19th and 20th centuries, it was common for just two sides to fight. Two countries, two groups of allies, now four coalitions collided, not two against two or three against one, no, all against all. There is no mention of holy wars in Surkov's vision, none of the cabaret used to provoke and tease the West. But there is a darkling vision of globalization in which instead of everyone rising together, interconnection means multiple contests between movements and corporations and city-states, where the old alliances, the EUs and NATOs and the West have all worn out, and where the Kremlin can play the new, fluctuating lines of loyalty and interest, the flows of oil and money, splitting Europe from America, pitting one Western company against another, and against both their governments, so no one knows whose interests are what and where they're headed. And of course he was banned recently, and a reporter asked him, "Won't this ban affect you?" A reporter asked Surkov as he passed through the Kremlin palace. "Your tastes point to you being a very Western person." Surkov smiled and pointed to his head. "I can fit Europe in here." Later he announced, "I see the decision by the administration in Washington as an acknowledgement of my service to Russia. It's a big honor for me. I don't have accounts abroad. The only things that interest me in the US are Tupac Shakur, Allen Ginsberg, and Jackson Pollock. I don't need a visa to access their work. I lose nothing." I'll put up a photograph which caught my attention, which was in this article in The Atlantic. Russian performance artist Oleg Kulik pretends to be a caged dog, an allegory for post-Soviet man. I'll put up a photograph of Vladislav Surkov and Vladimir Putin taken in 2006, and a photograph of a Jackson Pollock I took at the National Gallery of Art in Washington 784 days ago. My daughter Aisha is very keen on Jackson Pollock. The woman entered the police station saying in English that she had lost her purse and then blew herself up, Istanbul Governor Vasip Sahin told reporters at the scene. Marks an escalation. I'll put up a photograph of a police officer standing guard along a street after a female suicide bomber blew herself up in a police station at the Sultan Ahmet district of Istanbul, where I've been. A number of mosques in that district. NPR's Steve Inskeep asks Obama, "Are you just lucky that the price of oil went down and therefore their currency collapsed, or is it something that you did?" Obama said, "If you'll recall, their Russia economy was already contracting and capital was fleeing even before oil collapsed. And part of our rationale in this process was that the only thing keeping that economy afloat was the price of oil. And if in fact we were steady in applying sanctions pressure, which we have been, that over time it would make the economy of Russia sufficiently vulnerable that if and when there were disruptions with respect to the price of oil, which inevitably there are going to be some time, if not this year, then next year or the year after, that they'd have enormous difficulty in managing it." And this is what I've been talking severally in our last, which was on December the 1st, when I said this is a very 21st century shock and awe. President Obama has been a very subtle, skilled, hard-nosed exponent of currency and now oil warfare. I like this photograph from The Guardian. Bahrain youth kicks the tear gas container during the protests following the detainment of opposition leader Sheikh Ali Salman. The euro, when I looked last, was at 118.74. Investors are expecting the ECB to start money printing, and it touched a fresh low of 118.42. Dollar index 91.78. I've been bullish about that for a while. Japanese yen 119.03, having touched 118.06 yesterday, which was the strongest level for the yen since December 17th. Swissy 1.0115. Pound 151.47, Aussie 0.8075, India rupee 63.435, South Korean won 1100.38, the Rial 270.02, Egyptian pound 714.98, and the Rand 1172.58. The yen has strengthened 2.5% in 2015. That's a safe haven bid, and is the best performer of 10 developed nation currencies tracked by Bloomberg. Dollars up 1.9%, euros down 0.2%. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. My target remains 100. The dollar index rose 0.3%, touched 91.818, which was the highest level since December 2005. On the 25th of August 2014, I said if things tip big, the dollar might soar. Euro dollar, last time I looked 118.74, my target is 1. I said on the 29th of September, inflation in the Eurozone, which has its nose barely above zero at 0.4%, could go negative in the next 12 months. Reuters is saying we expect the ECB to announce a sovereign QE program on January the 22nd, and first purchases to probably start in the following week. That is the Citibank economist. Given the sizable decline in market-based inflation estimates and the likelihood of a negative print for the December flash estimate, we doubt the ECB will choose to wait. Investors will probably react very negatively to a no QE announcement. Not helping the euro was a report Germany was making contingency plans for the possible departure of Greece from the Eurozone. Bild cited unnamed government sources saying Berlin was running scenarios for the Jan 25 Greek election in case of a victory by the left-wing Syriza party. Yields on US 30-year paper dived to 2.471% to be just a whisker above their all-time low of 2.443%. The 10-year note yielded 1.94% and has fallen 23 basis points in just 3 sessions. Nanex LLC on Twitter tweeted, "Black line is liquidity in 10-year treasuries. You can see it dried up as buyers overwhelmed sellers." The mean yield among benchmark securities issued by the US, Japan, and Europe, known as the Group of Three, dropped to 0.89% yesterday, the lowest ever on Bloomberg data going back to 1989. 10-year yields declined to records in Australia and Japan. Germany's 5-year yield extended its push to negative levels. And it's been a phenomenal rally that we've seen in the bond market, commodity markets. Crude oil, I'll put up a 6-month chart. Last time I looked, 47.90. That was a couple of hours ago. $40 is now a given. Brent crude is now below $50 a barrel. It was at $51.01 yesterday after losing almost 10% so far this week. We're now through my $50 target, which I put out on the 13th of October. And we're in a situation where we see a surplus on the market, which is going to continue to pressure crude oil. I'll put up a 5-day chart as well. An interesting infographic from Business Insider, players in the global oil export market. And an interesting article in Bloomberg saying the biggest collapse in energy prices since the 2008 global recession is shifting wealth and power from autocratic petro-states to industrialized consumers, which could make the world safer, according to a Berenberg Bank report. If the price falls past $39 a barrel, we could see it go as low as $30 a barrel. technical strategist for United ICAP in New Jersey City. Biggest winner would be the Philippines, whose economic growth would accelerate to 7.6% on average over the next 2 years if oil fell to $40. Among advanced economies, Hong Kong is the biggest winner. Saudi Arabia, Russia, UAE fare the worst. Any massive redistribution of income can raise political tensions. But net strengthening the US, Europe, Japan, China and India, while weakening Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, is likely to make the world a safer place. I said on December the 1st that the oil price collapse marks a major inflection point. Gold, 1217.47, got as high as 1223.19, which was the highest since December the 16th. It's all about a safe haven bid. Coming to sub-Saharan Africa, let's start with the Gambia. The group believed that Gambian army soldiers would drop their weapons and flee, being unwilling to die for President Jammeh, said the FBI of the coup attempt. The plotters were wrong. The guard had been increased. One of the assault teams fired a shot in the air, hoping the soldiers would flee. Instead, they began firing on the plotters from guard towers around the compound. Most of the plotters died. A few fled. 2 codenamed Fox and Dave have been arrested and are in custody in the US. I'll put up a photograph of President Jammeh. Sure Kamunga tweeted, Bob Diamond has said average age in sub-Saharan Africa is 18, US is 38, and that there will be more babies born this year in Nigeria than all of Western Europe, which is something to consider. I like this article on Bloomberg. Brooklyn vibe as hipsters and craft beer come to Johannesburg. It's all very Brooklyn warehousey to me, and indeed it is, and it really is quite pleasant what they've created there, and it's well worth reading that article. I'll put up a photograph of Johannesburg sunset taken 277 days ago. The South African all-share bounced 1.6% yesterday. It's still down 2.34% year to date. Dollar rand 1172.56. My target is 12. Egyptian pound 714.94, 770 unofficially. Egyptian stock market down 2.35% yesterday. It's now negative for the year, 1.39%. Nigerian all share had a torrid session yesterday, down 4.19%. The all share is down 6.16% year to date. On the 10th of November, I said, turning to the markets in Africa, the Nigerian Naira and the all-share index have been wagadoogooed by the collapse in the price of oil. Nigeria said they're re-looking at FX rules as pledges no capital controls. Nigeria will never introduce capital controls and is reviewing a rule introduced last month that investors said crushed liquidity in the foreign exchange market, according to the governor of the central bank. Currency has been battered by crude prices, dropped more than 50% as prices since June. The Naira has depreciated 11% in the past 3 months. Central Bank of Nigeria last month told banks to clear foreign exchange positions daily, having previously allowed them net open positions of 1% of shareholder funds in a bid to bolster the currency. There will be a review in due course. This is Godwin Emefiele, said by a friend from Abuja, but I can tell you categorically it will no longer be 1%. It will be less than 1%. The reason we put a stop to 1% is because we felt it was too large to be held by banks as a trading position. The bank has no plans to change a rule adopted around the same time that dollars bought in the interbank market may be used within 48 hours or sold to the regulator. The Naira is currently appropriately priced, so the central bank governor, well, I think it's going to 220, even higher. Currency weakened for a second day, falling 0.4% to trade at 184.17. 18 trades in the Naira in the 8 hours through 5 p.m. yesterday, compared with 215 4 weeks ago, so completely dried up liquidity. Samir Gadio, head of African strategy at Standard Chartered, said, there's a risk that these measures last as long as the central bank feels it doesn't have the ability to control the exchange rate. The central bank is saying if any foreign investor needs to exit its position, he should make a demand to a bank. If the bank cannot find those dollars to buy in the interbank market, the central bank will provide the dollars, he said. So I think we've got a sort of hybrid, non-linear type of currency control. Witnesses said troops fought valiantly for several hours before running out of ammunition when they fled alongside civilians. This is the army base that was overrun. Ghana's stock exchange is up 0.6% year to date. In Mozambique, the spokesman for Renamo was arrested yesterday. He led last Saturday an illegal demonstration in Maputo. In addition, he has delivered speeches that incite violence, said the police spokesman. Tensions remain below the threshold for now. The IMF, in their latest report, forecast growth at 7.5% with low inflation. And on that note, I'll put up a photograph of Maputo taken from the sea 947 days ago. I like this photograph of the Kempinski Palace Hotel in Djibouti, and the description in the Africa Report is that it does not lack important foreign guests. Coming to Kenya, IRIN is reporting that the suspension recently of parts of this securities bill included a section of the wide-ranging bill popularly known as the anti-terror law. The amendment stipulates that the number of refugees and asylum seekers permitted to stay in Kenya shall not exceed 150,000. Currently, there are over 600,000 refugees, asylum seekers and stateless people living in Kenya, according to the UNHCR. So you can see the challenge there. We are getting a $500 million loan from the World Bank to clear loans held by Kenya Power so that we can lower the interest cost. This is the Energy Secretary, Davis Churcher, in an interview in the Business Daily. Kenya Power increased its borrowings from 51 billion to 70 billion last year, but obviously some of this news leaked into the market. Kenya Power has surged to 10.175% over the last two trading sessions. There's a link there for the share price data. According to The Nation, Base notes the recommendation of the board of World Titanium that their shareholders should reject the offer. The board holds barely any shares. The directors of Base continue to believe there are compelling reasons to accept the offer and encourage World Titanium shareholders to read the bidder's statement carefully. I expect Base to get the 40%. There are a lot of pre-bid acceptances. I wrote a piece over the weekend. Base launches an offer for World Titanium Resources, and I put up a photograph of Tim I took 951 days ago. The shilling, 1990 last. Nairobi all-share fell marginally, 0.19%. It's down 0.63% year to date. NSE 20 actually improved 0.17%, and it's down 0.28% year to date. Interesting piece in the Business Daily about how small caps stirred the market with huge capital gains in 2014. This is a theme that I've spoken about severally over the year. They specifically talked about the agricultural stocks. Car in General was another one, Olympia Capital, Express Kenya, Kenya Orchards, Kakuzi, and if you're interested in that, just do scroll down on Rich Wrap-Ups and look at that other link where you can dive into any share that's listed at the stock exchange. You can compare and see what's happened. Once again, thank you for stopping by. Remember, if you want to track the stock exchange here in Nairobi, all you do is log on to rich.co.ke, register, it's free, get a password, and then go to Rich Live, 9:30 to 3 o'clock Kenya time, and you can plug into the live feed directly from the stock exchange. Once again, thank you.